Well, let me congratulate IBB for putting pen to paper to tell Nigerians about his life history and the consequential things that happened along the line of his eventful life. I mean, he has had a very eventful life, and it was a good thing he put it to paper so that the next generation would learn from what he did or what he did not do. About 1966 Q, let me say that IBB was an eyewitness. And in law, the evidence of an eyewitness is admissible without more, because that's direct evidence from somebody who saw it, who heard it, who perceived it. So it was good that he put pen to paper on that particular episode. The central point of his submission is the total exoneration of the Igbo people as being the architects of that coup. And indeed, it couldn't ever have been the Igbo people. First and foremost, the Igbo people have their traditional leaders, political leaders, social-cultural leaders, religious leaders. Before you hang something on a people, you must prove that their leadership cadre was involved in the conspiracy, in the planning and execution of a change of government by force before you say it is done or was done by a people. In all the historical postulations about 1966 Q, there was no time they linked it to our leadership. All the people that participated in it were all military men employed, trained by Nigeria as military men. So no matter their tribe, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their religion, this was purely a military coup, military action conducted by military men. If 1966 coup was a military coup, then 1983 coup, 1966 revenge coup, 1985 coup, they are all military coups. Why is it that we do not talk about the ethnicity or religion of all the people that carried out all these subsequent coups? Why do you say they are military coups? Because indeed they are military coups. So please, it is wrong to ascribe a military coup to a people, because the people are not part of the Nigerian army. So what happened in 1966 coup, first and foremost, was a military coup. Let's go into the nitty-gritty of the coup. What was the reason for the coup? The coup plotters adduced that it was to target the political class that has become corrupt and receives 10% from any contracts they issue out. 2, the intractable violence that followed the 1964-1965 election that was done in the Western region. You know, there was an acrimonious relationship between Akintola and Awolowo. And there was an allegation that the government, central government under Tafawa Balewa, rigged election in favor of Akintola, and it led to great violence in this Western region that became intractable. And then that was one of the reasons that the coup plotters struck. What was the aim of the coup? The aim of the coup was to bring Awolowo to become president. Don't take my words for it. Take the words of the Owa of Idoani, Major General Olufebi Olutayo, retired. He was a major in 1964 when he met Major Kaduna Nzogu in India. This was his words. He said he asked Nzogu, who do you want to pick to lead the nation if you succeed in the coup? He said they want to pick a man who was more knowledgeable than they were, who had what it took to make Nigeria great. And that man was Awolowo. It is not surprising because by independence, Major Kaduna Nzogu was from Western region. That was where he was from. And by 1966, he was from Midwestern region. And everybody know that it is in the Eastern region that you have predominant Igbos. So Major Kaduna Nzogu was born in Kaduna, raised in Kaduna, and IBB said he was more Hausa than any other tribe. I give you an example. In Britain, there was a man whose name was Nigerian. He went into the street in a terrorist attack and used knife and hacked a law officer down. And Britain wanted initially to say, no, he's a Nigerian. Nigeria says, sorry. He was born in Britain. He has never even been to Nigeria. He was groomed, raised in Britain. So whatever about terrorism that concerns this particular person, he was not a Nigerian. Yes, we accept he has a Nigerian name, but he is British because he was born and raised there. Kaduna is an Hausa name. Major Kaduna Nzogu was born in the north, grew up in the north. Even when he was carrying out the coup, his personal physician, who was his doctor, was an Hausa man. He wouldn't trust you if you were not an Hausa man, because that is him for you. Babangida said he was as Hausa as any, spoke fluent Hausa. So by birth, a Northerner. By nurture, a Northerner. By political affiliation, a Westerner. And Babangida rightly pointed out that he was only Igbo in name. His ancestry, not even all his names. The first name Hausa. The ancestral name Nzogu was what was Igbo. Look at the people whose reason was not because of anything happening in Igbo land. The people who struck to make Awolowo a non-Igbo president. How does it have anything to do with Ndi Igbo? People have always said that part of the reason people suspected it was Igbo was because it did not happen in the eastern region. This is where they got it wrong. The question is, why did it not happen in the eastern region? One, eastern region was not harboring the capital of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So if you're a coup plotter, the first place that you want to visit is the capital of the country. Because you don't have it, you're wasting your time. Who is that foolish coup plotter who will be risking his life in treasonable felony, chasing rats when the house is burning? So the center point of any coup is the capital of the country, which was located in Lagos. Secondly, there was no Igbo person in the political field that was occupying any command post that could have threatened the survival of the coup. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was a ceremonial president, commanding nothing. Even if they had gotten Nnamdi Azikiwe, it wouldn't have been in the east, because as the president, he would have still been living in the west, as in the capital of the nation. Now, why again did it not happen in the southeast? Because the main core of the elite military corps of the Nigerian army from southeast origin, they were against the coup. Indeed, they were the ones that crushed the coup. Have you ever heard the name of any military officer from the north or west that fought to crush the coup? Babangida named them Major John Obienu, Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. These is me now saying it, because he was commanding a brigade or a battalion or thereabout in Kano State. And then Major General, or as he then was, Brigadier General Johnson Thomas Omonakwe Aguyuronse, who was the highest military officer. These people crushed and quelled the coup. The Southeastern Military Corps did not support the coup. And I give you another point to tell you that Nzogu himself is not even versatile with the Southeast, with the Eastern region when the war started, because he didn't know his terrain very well. Almost the same week the war started, a marksman killed him in the Biafran side because he was fighting in a terrain not known to him. Major Ifeanyi Ifajuna, Major Emmanuel Ifajuna, another member of the coup, when the war started, wanted even to overthrow Ojukwu himself. He was executed in Biafra, telling you that those main people who are from Igbo origin, who participated in the coup, do not even have the agreement of the main elite military officer corps of the Southeast. They don't even trust them, because the aim of Ndi Igbo then was one Nigeria. That was why they were living in all parts of Nigeria. So they were embarrassed. Are the Igbo officers the only people in that queue? No. You had Major Adewale Ademoyega, Captain Ganiyu Adeleke, Lieutenant Fola Oyewole, and Lieutenant Olamifuno or something like that, by Babangida's account. Obasanjo also named more accounts, including Hausa officers. So let me tell you, what Babangida said was not even original from him. During the Oputa panel, the director of military intelligence then, one General Ibrahim Sabo, came out openly and said the only coup in Nigeria that had the national interest in the operation of the plotters was the 1966 coup conducted by Major Nzogu. Ibrahim Sabo, that name does not sound Igbo to you. A Northerner, a Muslim Northerner. Major Hamza Al-Mustafa, the former CSO of Abacha, he came on Oputa panel and made the same statement that the only coup that was motivated by national interest is Major Kaduna Nzogu coup. Major Mustafa is not an Igbo man. There was one governor, Madaki. He was a governor. During military regime, as a matter of fact, during Babangida's regime, he came out openly and declared that the only coup in Nigeria that was conducted that had national interest was Major Nzogu's coup. Babangida told him to withdraw his statement at the risk of losing his commission, at the risk of losing being a governor. He said he stands by it. The reason Babangida was telling him to withdraw it is that Babangida himself came through Coup. So if this officer is saying that the only one that had national interest, that means he's invariably referring that even his own had no national interest. Do you know what? That valiant officer maintained his stand and he was removed from the army. I still remember because he was a lawyer then. He went and put on his lawyer's gown and headed to the court and was willing to throw away the military rather than not saying the truth. So all these people, they were all eyewitnesses. They were all ear witnesses to what happened in 1966 coup. And they made it clear that it was not an Igbo coup. Now, look at the people that were killed. It was very, as Babangida described it, it was heinous. And that's why I don't like military incursion. Because of the possibility of shedding blood, including collateral damage. It was wrong. It was condemnable. that these politicians, especially the ones that did not resist arrest, were killed. No, it was wrong. But do you know, the killing was all over Nigeria. Yes, it was a very terrible, bad thing to kill Ahmadu Bello, especially when he did not resist. Very terrible. Can't justify it. Tafawa Balewa was killed. You have some Yoruba officers that were killed. Those people were killed, they were killed because they were in line and could frustrate the coup. They were in line because they were perceived to be a threat to the revolution, not because of where they come from, not because of their ethnicity or religion. And this is my point to prove it. Lieutenant Colonel Ato Chinyelo Unebe was killed. They call him one of the most disciplined officers in Nigerian army, an Igbo man, the quartermaster general of Nigeria then. He was in charge of the ammunition, the weapons, the equipment, the logistics. And the coup plotters knew that he was a threat to the revolution. And they went to him. Major Chris Anuforo, an Igbo officer, went to him and killed him in front of the pregnant wife. And you're telling me, if it's an Igbo coup, then an Igbo man will pick up a gun and go to shoot this man in front of his pregnant wife. What happened to the north, happened to the west, happened to the east. It is just because those storytellers, with intention to malign Ndi Igbo and misconstrue facts, they now elevated everything, hid a lot of facts to make it appear as if it had anything to do with Ndi Igbo. Ndi Igbo, they were the most progressive then, most prosperous. They had in every sector of Nigeria, they were almost in charge. So why would they want to go and conduct a coup? Ndi Igbo suffered from the 1966 coup. Any Igbo man that was in line with anything that could frustrate the revolution, because that's what they called it, they killed him if they could. So it was a misnomer from the one to call it an Igbo coup, because the reason for the coup was not Igbo. The aim of the coup was not Igbo. The people that perpetrated the coup were military officers from all ethnic groups and from all tribes. And the people that were killed were all the people they could get to that are in line with being threats to the revolution, irrespective of their ethnicity, religion, creed, or place of origin. So Babangida did the right thing for exonerating Ndi Igbo. And henceforth, because I have been saying it in my own interview all this while, that Ndi Igbo has nothing to do with the coup. If an Igbo man is a military man, he becomes a military man. He becomes an officer of the Nigerian military, not an Igbo man. Whatever he's doing it in the name of being an officer of the army. Just like in 1983, the military took over. Nobody said it was an Hausa coup. Even when a Fulani was made the head of state, nobody said it was a Fulani coup. They said the military has taken over. Buhari came into power. 1985. Babangida came into power. Northerner from Nupe. Nobody said it was a Nupe coup. Then it continued. So please, whatever happens by the military should be described for what it is. Military coup. For me, it's not an Hausa coup. It's not a Yoruba coup. It's not an Igbo coup. It is a military coup. And that is how it should be described. Henceforth, it will be defamatory. Henceforth, for anybody to attribute that coup again to Ndi Igbo. And for the sake of the unity of this country, especially for us that believe that Nigeria is a better place for all of us, we must learn to allow old hostilities to depart with old age and allow new breath of fresh air to permeate the beautiful environment of Nigeria. There are no Igbos, there are no Hausas, there are no Yorubas. All of us form the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So there are Igbos, there are Yorubas, there are Hausas, there are Fulanis, there are Ibibios, there are all of us form the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So whatever is your tribe, you're not in competition with Nigeria. You are part of Nigeria. So let us do things that will make us leave better legacy for our children and live in a better place. 1966, I repeat, was a military coup. It could never have been an Igbo coup.
What's your opinion about the June 12th annulment?
Well, I was an eyewitness in June 12th. I saw it there. And so when I'm talking now, I'm talking as an eyewitness. 1966, somebody can say, and that was why I quoted all the people that said the things they said in 1966. But in June 12th, I was an eyewitness. So whatever I say now, I stand by it. First of all, June 12th would have been one of the best things that would have happened to Nigeria, because it was a day Nigerians went out to vote for a president in the freest, fairest election, where a man who contested the election, MKO Abiola, won fair and square. That suddenly what would have been the best suddenly turned to become the worst, because for no reason known to common sense, for no reason known to any reasonable person, the election was annulled by Babangida, and Babangida alone, and unleashed the unrest on the country and Nigerian people. Now, let's talk about the transition program of Babangida. Immediately, Babangida overthrew Buhari on August 27, 1985. He promised from that same day that he was going to hand over power to a democratically elected government by 1990. Along the line, he set up a political bureau that advised him on what to do. And within the time, summarily, let me just move summarily. When it was getting to 1990, Babangida decided that he was going to experiment with diarchy. In other words, a system of government where the civilians will be elected and the military will also be in power. And he used that opportunity to extend his transition from 1990 to 1992. Babangida did not blame anybody that the person was responsible for the extension, because being a military head of state, his word was law. He ruled by decrees. And you know what? Babangida said, I dominate my environment with power, with the power of firearms. So he was in charge and he was in power. Babangida had been a professional coup plotter. So he knows everything about coup plotting. And everybody knows that you make a mistake, you're gone. You recall that his best man in his wedding, Mama Mfasa, he tied him on the stake for rumors of coup and shot him. So no military junior of IBB ever in his front took him for granted, because they know the consequences. when the Oka people did the coup, he shot all of them. Even when there was a court martial that exonerated some of them and said they will not face death penalty, IBB constituted another court martial that retried those people and decided to kill all of them. It was Major General Ike Nwachukwu that was the head of the first court martial that condemned the first set of people and exonerated the rest. But IBB set up another one, and they had to kill the others. So you can imagine such a man. And then he will say something, and you're telling me that another person influenced him to change his mind. No. So he shifted it from 1990. All other elections of the lower level, they were being held. But when it comes to the one of the presidency, it will be shifted. So from 1990, we shifted the presidential election to 1992. In 1992, before then, IBB decided that he was not satisfied with all the political parties that the politicians set up for themselves. He decided to set up the political parties for the politicians. So IBB set up National Republican Convention and set up Social Democratic Party and told politicians to join in. He wrote their constitutions for them, wrote their manifestos, and he was in charge of all the security apparatus. So IBB owned the transition. So how can you own the transition? He built the secretariats for the parties in all the 700, in all the local governments of Nigeria. They were not up to 700 then. He built all the secretariats for them. So you as a politician, you don't have any say. So whatever IBB said was what was done, 100%. Even the house you were staying as your secretariat was not your own. So SDP, NRC went into election, primary election in 1992. IBB say it was rigged. There was electoral malpractices, this and that. In fairness, I witnessed it. Being honest, that primary election was difficult for anybody to say it was free and fair. But that was internal affairs of the political party. And the politicians helped to say it should be cancelled. Of course, IBB jumped at it and cancelled it. Not once, but twice. By that time, people have already concluded that this man does not want to leave power. He cancelled those things, not because they were rigged. Because in my own opinion, that primary that was done, which eventually was won by Shehu Musa Yar'Adua and Adamu Cheroma. Shehu Musa Yar'Adua of the SDP, Adamu Cheroma of the NRC. It was really mad by rigging. So IBB cancelled them. But he did not cancel them because they were mad by rigging. He cancelled them because he saw an opportunity not to leave power. And each time he cancels an election, he gives himself about 1 year more or 2 years. Remember, he shifted from 1990 to 1992. So when he canceled the election in 1992, the primary election, he now shifted the presidential election to 1993. That was how we came to June 12. Why did I say the primary election that he cancelled, even though there was rigging? Why did I say it was not because of rigging? Why I said it was that when June 12 now came, the primary elections of MKO and Tofa, because they were the ones who emerged, was peaceful, without incident. And IBB say he's surprised. Now, immediately it was peaceful. IBB started becoming agitated. And then we started seeing associations springing up from anywhere saying IBB must rule forever. One of it was Association for Better Nigeria, headed by Atom Zeribe. This was an IBB who said it was against the law to do anything, say anything that would truncate the transition to civil rule. And this is a man now telling you openly to cancel the transition and rule for 4 years. And IBB admitted in his book that no, he approved of it, because if people were talking against him, then if he sees anybody who is talking for him, approving him, why would he stop the person? This is IBB talking in his book. So that means he endorsed Association for Better Nigeria. And what was Association of Better Nigeria saying? IBB should govern for 4 more years. So allowing that, of course, we know how supporters of government are raised in this country. So the June 12th election, MKO Abiola and Tofa emerged. So IBB's hands were tied. But he did not sleep when it was becoming obvious that June 12th was about to happen. By June 10, Association for Better Nigeria went to court under Justice Ikpeme, Basi Ikpeme, and obtained an injunction to stop June 12th from going on. Meanwhile, the Decree 13 or thereabout, written by IBB himself, oust the jurisdiction of any court to give any order stopping the election. The mere fact that IBB even summoned a meeting to think and talk about it in June, by June 11, tells you that he was becoming uncomfortable. That is like this election was going on. So he wanted to, because IBB is a very smart person. So that meeting, the aim was to feel the impact of the people, to know whether they are in support of the election going on or not. So in that meeting, his own NEC chairman, Professor Nwosu, brilliant professor, first class material, University of Nigeria, he came and overwhelmed them when the Abacha them and all those groups were saying no, the transition cannot go on, this and that. Professor Nwosu came and overwhelmed them with his argument. IBB, looking at the environment, knew he had no choice. He told Professor Nwosu to continue with the election. Now, this shows that IBB had all the powers, because courts spoke. Some of those officers he was referring to spoke, and he came and overruled all of them, and none of them did him. The June 12th went on. So that singular act is enough to tell the whole world who was in charge and who was in power, and that IBB had power over the courts. IBB had power over all his junior officers, and they dare not say anything if IBB has said something. Then, after the June 12th, IBB again said in his book, I'm sure when he was making this revelation, he was not aware he's actually exposing the real thing that happened. He said, to my surprise, the election of June 12th was peaceful, and indeed very peaceful. To my surprise. Why would you be surprised that an election was peaceful if you want the election to go on? No, you should be happy. So when that election now was held, results started coming in. The person that was in charge of that election, his name was Professor Humphrey Nwosu. His name was not Professor Yakubu Mahmood. Humphrey Nwosu promised that he was going to bring a signboard, a board, electronic board, where the results would be uploaded and the whole world would be seeing it. And that was what he did. June 13th, 14th, till 16th. All the results had come in. 14 results from the 14 states have been uploaded. MKO was coasting to victory. And from nowhere, Humphrey Nwosu was seized by some people, forced to stop, to suspend announcing the results. At gunpoint, the same IBB that summoned the meeting and said the election will go on. In his own book, he said he retired back to Mina. So IBB ran away, kept himself incommunicado. And IBB confessed that within that time, there were discussions, where annulment was brought up. He refused anybody seeing him. So there was a law. He said within that time, he wanted to reach an agreement with Abiola to accept an arrangement. Meaning, maybe he wanted Abiola to come and start serving under him, to elongate his power. And he actually said, Abiola, of course, refused. He tried every option. When every option failed him, he now told the world that he heard about the annulment by one Ndokairabo, a press secretary of Admiral Ikomu, that he went to Katsina, that he was surprised. If you were surprised, what do you do? Because that's treason. That's a coup. IBB himself acknowledged that that was aborting the sovereign will of the people. Now, you said you heard it on the 23rd of June, and you're surprised. And then on the June 26th, you, IBB, now came out in a public broadcast and said you are annulling the election, and now gave an excuse that the election was rigged, mad with electoral practice. That's why I said that even the first one that was mad with rigging, that he annulled, he did not annul it because it was mad by rigging. He annulled it because he didn't want to go. Because this other one now that was peaceful, he still annulled it and gave the excuse again that it was mad by rigging. But in his book, he said on sober reflection, no, it was not on sober reflection, because he noted that in his book, that after the election, to his own surprise, every security report showed that the election was peaceful. And indeed, very peaceful. So he knew from the one, not by sober reflection, by the confession in his book. So he annulled the second election because he didn't want to leave power. Not because anybody intimidated him or forced him or coerced him or induced him. No. When he annulled that second election, June 12th, the first thing he did was to give another extension for people to come again and start contesting. He extended it again. And Nigerians said no. Politicians said no. That was when he knew that the time was up. So IBB annulled June 12th for only one reason. He didn't want to leave power. He wanted to continue with power. Now, IBB said it was the forces led by Abacha that annulled June 12th. But he's taking responsibility. That's not true. Sorry. That was false. Now, let me tell you about the Abacha angle. Abacha was regarded as a taciturn general. He doesn't talk. Abacha was a professional coup plotter like IBB. So they know themselves, they know each other. He has been in the center of coup making. Let me say it clearly that Abacha wanted to be head of state. That is clear. And he was biding his time. So what happened was that Abacha knew that Babangida did not want to leave power. But Abacha knew that if Babangida hands over power to a democratically elected government, he will never be head of state again. So what he did was he created the impression to Babangida that if you annul this election, I will support you. And because he has been supporting Babangida in every issue, helped Babangida save his life, this and that, Babangida didn't have any reason to doubt him. Babangida confessed that immediately he cancelled the election, the bottle burst, and that Abacha became a new man. He now realized he didn't know him from beginning. That was true. And the reason was because Abacha was in support of Babangida's intention to annul the election. So Abacha knew it and created the impression to him. Because it will be in Abacha's interest if that civilian rule is annulled. It will help him to become the head of state. So that Abacha started recruiting some of those progressive military men like Dangiwa Abacha knew that Dangiwa was very honest. Dangiwa was in charge of the group who wanted the revalidation of June 12th. They were ashamed that the army made a promise to the people and they are reneging from the promise, and that the uniform they are wearing should be a uniform of honor, that when they pass through the street of Nigeria, Nigeria should respect them. And Babangida, having reneged on his promise, should go. Abacha knew this thing. So Abacha now created the impression to the Dangiwa group that he wants to help revalidate the June 12th, and that Babangida did not want to leave power. That if Babangida doesn't go, they will throw him out forcefully. And the Dangiwa group, being sincere, liked it, because they thought they were dealing with a general who wants to revalidate June 12th. So Abacha, immediately Babangida annulled the election, Abacha withdrew his support from Babangida. And Babangida knew who Abacha was. So Babangida knew he was in problem. And Abacha now had secured the support of all those progressive professional coup plotters who genuinely want to revalidate June 12th. So when Babangida saw it, that was when Babangida now knew. And when he extended the transition, Nigerians were no longer interested. Nigerians moved against him. So he decided to step aside on the 27th of August. That was a major victory for Abacha. Now, when Babangida has decided to step aside, Abacha now does no longer need the Dangiwa people who wants to revalidate the June 12th. Abacha created impression to MKO that MKO should just be patient. He can go outside the country and relax, so that when they finish stabilizing the country, because Babangida instituted an interim government when he's going on August 27th. If Babangida wanted MKO, he would have simply revalidated the June 12th and said MKO should be sworn in on August 27th, and that would have just been the end of it. But Abacha group did not want it, because Abacha wanted to be head of state. So Abacha preferred the interim government as a compromise. Immediately now, then MKO trusted Abacha, because Abacha doesn't talk much. Abacha started giving, when he goes to deliver, message, because he doesn't grant interviews, but, like an address as the chief of joint chief of staff, he will talk democracy, how he loves the democracy, and MKO was praising him. So when the Dangiwa group, when Babangida decided to step aside, Abacha did not need the Dangiwa group anymore, because the Dangiwa group will now be an obstacle to him. So immediately the interim government now was set up, Abacha started retiring them. So Dangiwa now went to him, and Abacha said, you offered to retire. When Babangida did what he did, Dangiwa offered to retire from the army instead of being part of the shame. They encouraged him not to retire, including Abacha. Then Abacha needed him. He said, no, you shouldn't retire. This Babangida doesn't want to go. We can take him out. This and that. Dangiwa agreed. When then Babangida stepped aside, Abacha did not need him anymore. They now brought Dangiwa. Dangiwa, you said you wanted to retire that time. We have now accepted your retirement. They eased him out of the army. Abacha started easing all those bright coup plotters out of the army. He has secured the endorsement of MKO, because the impression is, just allow me. When I settle, I would revalidate it. So when Abacha saw that he had become stable, because the Abiola group never and shouldn't ever have liked Shoneko, being an Egba man, to take the position that MKO should have taken. They continued fighting him. Civil society fighting him. They went to court, and court declared his regime illegal. So what Abacha needed to do was to go to Shoneko. You see, court has declared you illegal. You can no longer guarantee the security. And then Shoneko had to resign. And when Shoneko resigned, Abacha assumed the head of state. By a law written by Babangida. Babangida, when he was going, said, in the event that the interim national government collapses or resigns or is dead, the most senior minister will take over power. Abacha was the most senior minister. And Babangida was to confess in his book that he knew, even when he was saying that Shoneko was going to collapse. So eventually, Babangida now made way for Abacha to take over. The same person you're accusing, he was the one who annulled the June 12. In fairness to Babangida, in that particular point, there needed to be a very strong military man to be able to hold Nigeria together then, because everything was scattered. So, when Abacha now assumed power, MKO was one of the earliest callers. I still remember the sofa. Both of them sat. Abacha, called even when MKO sat down in the sofa. Abacha told him to shift closer. And MKO shifted closer. And then Abacha, they took the picture and he beamed it to the whole world and created the impression that everybody supports his emergence. Having gotten that stability, he started reneging. By the time MKO realized it, it was too late. MKO, in frustration, declared himself president. Abiola took him, put him in jail. Abiola did not want to kill him. Abiola knew that if MKO is alive and is in jail, it's better for him. Why? No other politician would want to be president, because the sword of June 12 was hanging on everybody's head. So you can only rule by force. You can only rule by decree. So he kept him, was feeding him in jail, and was enjoying the palace. The irony of the Nigerian Federation, the people who ought to be in jail are always in the presidency, and the people who are in the presidency ought to be in jail. It is still continuing till today. Abiola, that won an election free and fair, was kept in jail. And the people who truncated his mandate, truncated the sovereign will of the people, who conducted a coup against the Third Republic, they were in the presidency. Abacha remained there, kept Abiola in jail. And when Abacha wanted to conduct his own transition to civil rule, you know what happened? All the parties came together to unanimously adopt Abacha as the presidential candidate. That was why Bola Ige said, this is 5 fingers of a leprous hand and destroyed the integrity of the transition. The politicians were not doing it because of sycophancy. They were doing it because there was no vacancy. Even if you are elected as president, as a politician, how do you solve the June 12 issue? So, suddenly from nowhere, Abacha died. And then, about 1 month after, from nowhere, Abiola died. I've always said that the same thing that killed Abacha killed Abiola. I don't know. If you say it's of natural consequence, 2 of them died of natural consequence. If you say there was a hand of Esau, the same hand of Esau that killed one, killed the other one, I don't know. But I know that both of them suddenly, in the same circumstance, Abacha attended a state function a day before, and the next day we heard he died. Fell down, swooned on the mouth, foam coming out, and died. Abiola was being negotiated with, foreign and domestic, and suddenly he died after drinking one tea. That tea, I don't know where it was made from. So that was how both of them died. That was how Abdul Salam came in, and we entered the Fourth Republic. That's the Fourth Republic we are in now. It was an unfortunate incident. Babangida should have solved this problem in his book by making one statement. I was the head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces during June 12. The annulment of June 12 was under my watch. it was an unfortunate thing I did, which I know from the benefit of hindsight I shouldn't have done. I regret that action. I am sorry about that action. I seek for your forgiveness. Forgive me. It is one thing that I did which I know I shouldn't have done. Let this be the atonement for the June 12th. That's all. Why would you shift blame to your junior officers? It's an insult to yourself. You disrespected your rank. You portrayed yourself as a coward. People who are donned military uniform are people who have signed to die, fighting for just cause, fighting for their country, fighting for their flag. You, Babangida, coming out to say that your junior officers overruled you and that they were the ones who annulled the election. What legacy have you created for yourselves? Because forever you have created the impression that you're a coward who is overruled by his junior officers. And funny enough, what he said was not true, because he was the one who annulled the election. So Babangida, for that June 12th explanation, it was a missed opportunity. I hope he would have the time to redeem his image and himself before passing to the other side of the world.
How do you react to the defection of Valentine Ozigbo to the All Progressive Congress, APC? What's your next political move?
Well, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, including joining any political party of your choice, is a constitutional right of every Nigerian citizen. Section 40 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. So Valentine simply exercised his freedom, his rights, fundamental right for that matter, guaranteed by the Constitution, and I wish him well. He went to APC, which he said, by his own political calculation, that is the best choice for him. Do you blame him? Why would you blame him? When in his own opinion, he believes, as most of us, that the purported executive of Labour Party that are working for APC. So what is the difference whether he is in Labour Party governed by APC and whether he is in APC? That's why I said, I don't want to be part of that charade, because I cannot be talking against APC. And I'm staying in a place where I know that the people have become housemates of APC. And then I am pretending that I am not a member of APC. So I think Valentine may have taken a decision. Why would I be under this party? And the party we know that their leadership is under APC. Maybe let me go to the main APC and know that I am part of the main APC, rather than being a servant to servant of APC. You see? And that is why I'm saying that leaders must learn to take decisive decision when they see something going wrong. Because what you compromise to get, you compromise to keep. When this army of so-called Labour Party executives did not do a convention, they know that they have compromised the law. So they needed to compromise their integrity by now wanting to make an alliance with some powerful forces behind them to help them to sustain that illegality of a convention. Let's look at it. Abure has a strategy. What Abure does is he goes to appoint people who are substandard, who are low level, who lack in common sense, ideology, logic, clear thought, objectivity, and who are not knowledgeable. He picks them from their level and appoints them to a very high office so that they do not come against him for anything. That was what he did to many of them. Arabambi came out to the TV and said one Ahanotu, who is parading himself as the youth leader, was a messenger, employed as a messenger in the Labour Party. Arabambi said it, to pick, to serve them. And this is the same person that Abure picked and appointed him to be youth leader. You know why he does those things? So that none of them can stand up against him, whatever he wants to do. He has not conducted any ward, local government, state executive, Congress. He has not conducted any Congress. So all the people there, he picked all of them. And he makes sure that he picks very, very low standard people. And they talk like his houseboys. I talk by facts. Can you imagine one Ahanotu coming to television to say what Governor Oti did in Umuahia was a wedding party? The only governor of your party who, when INEC declared that there was no executive in Labour Party, the governor who the constitution of Labour Party mandated him to be part of the NEC, the governor called all the other members of the NEC and organized a stakeholders meeting where everybody was invited, including Abre and his cohorts. And they appointed a caretaker committee. And one Ahanotu was going around television stations saying that what Governor Oti, their only governor, did was a wedding party. Is that not a houseboy's talk? But he has to talk like a houseboy because he was picked from being a messenger. So what you have in Labour Party now is Abure and Abure houseboys and housegirls. Nothing is non-existent. I can tell you when they were going to do that Newi convention, all of them loathed Abure. They didn't want Abure. I was on his side, so I know what was going on. But Abure told them that if I go down, all of you will go down. That was how they reached that agreement. Okay, let us return everybody, except the people that on principle have said that they don't want to be part of the charade. People like the national treasurer, who said Abure forged her signature and stole money. These are all the only people that were not part of the charade because she left. So they now picked themselves and went to one backyard in New and said that they have conducted a convention and appointed all of them posts. None of them contested for the post with anybody. So when somebody is coming out to shamelessly claim you are a member of the executive of a party, who elected you? Because you have confessed you came out unopposed. Can you imagine a party where from the chairman to everybody came out unopposed? That means it was not contested for by their own admission. I wouldn't have had anything if a messenger rose by the acceptance of the people and became anything. I will applaud the person. But when a messenger is picked for the sole aim to occupy a position so that the messenger can only react and give the knowledge of a messenger, so he will not be able to stand up to the appointer, then that's where the problem is. So the elected members are leaving because the people there are not relatable with. Take a pig to Los Angeles, he will remain a pig. Take a messenger with a messenger mentality to anywhere, he will still remain a messenger. So they are not to Abure's houseboy going about. Kenneth Okonkwo did this, Kenneth Okonkwo did that. He said he's a youth. In Nigeria, that's the only place they will tell you that a man who is 13 years old will come in a car with his wife and children. He said he's a youth. When I did living in bondage 1992, because a youth, highest, 35 years, highest, if you want to be generous. Okay, he said he's the youth leader. I did my living in bondage 1992. That's about 33 years. Take out 33 years from 35 years, 2 years. So he was 2 years when I did living in bondage. And he's running about. Kenneth Okonkwo. You know, the movie he did, Living in Bondage, is still affecting him. Yes, it's affecting me positively. At the age of 24, I made an international name deposited on my laps. It opened Nollywood. More than millions of the youths are being employed. It's affecting me. 30 years after, the movie was so alive that people started clamoring for more, and we went back and did another one. We are living in that one. The title is Living in Bondage, Breaking Free. So even with living in bondage, I have broken free. Free from the houseboy mentality of people like Ahanotu. So what you have in Labour Party now is Abure and Abure house boys and house girls. There is nothing like executive of Labour Party. That was why when I was resigning, I resigned to the Nigerian people, because Nigerian people are the residual of all powers. Sovereignty belongs to the people, from whom every government derives its authority and powers. So even the power that Labour Party or whoever is executive has derived from the people of Nigeria. So since there is no Labour Party executive known to law, they are quoting court order, court this. First of all, it is not the court. The court has told you, sorry, we are not the people that give you leadership. We don't have the jurisdiction to give you leadership. Every political party should throw up its own leadership. So they have to come and convince the world who voted for them, not what court said, so that you can have the democratic rights to govern. Because irrespective of what the court say, if you're not voted in by the people will never accept you. So we are practicing democracy, not judiciocracy. The judiciary are not the ones who put the power on the people. It is the people. And as long as I was not invited for any convention, as long as there was no public notice to members of the party of any convention, there was no convention. Forever, that's what it's supposed to be. And they have never gone to court to tell the court. We had a convention in the Navy. Court confirmed that this convention is legal. Approve us as leaders of the party based on this convention. I have not seen a case like that. They say the Biseni case, that was an Ondo case, talking about the Ondo gubernatorial election. They talked about, so the issue in Labour Party is that Labour Party, in my own opinion now, is dead, non-existent. So the issue of having crisis does not even arise. I've told you that any politician that is speaking from there, and I'm saying it again, thank God I have resigned from Labour Party and my resignation had taken effect on 25th February. You will not call me and say I influenced you to do it when you start seeing the repercussion of what you have done. Your decision is yours. Kenneth Okonkwo is not a member of Labour Party. My aim now is I am praying, working towards a coalition of every opposition member to see whether we can come together and chart a new course for our country, Nigeria. That's my preference. I put it into the hand of God and believe God that it will work. So for me, Labour Party is non-existent. I will advise them to desist from calling my name. If they call my name once, I will call them 7 times. They should remember I was part of them. I am not saying certain things because anything I'm told in confidence or I know in confidence, I don't share with the public. They should not push me. So they should mind their business. Abure and his house boys and house girls should mind their business. The people that are leaving is because they cannot relate with Abure and his house boys and house girls parading themselves as executive of Labour Party. So I'm done with Labour Party. I've moved on, believing that the only thing that can make the opposition to make any impact in 2027 is to come together as one and chart a new course for this country.
What's your comments on the Supreme Court judgment on Rivers State government?
You know, thank God for education. Thank God for knowledge. People do not understand that there is a difference between law and rule of law. In Nigeria, we keep churning out laws every day. Nigeria is not lacking in laws. We have laws everywhere. More laws than even America, than any of those countries. But what we don't have is rule of law. And it's unfortunate. So when people call court, and they say rule of law, sorry, no. The court does not give you rule of law. The court gives you law. It is only when the law, because the courts give law because decided cases are part of our hierarchy of laws. Decided cases give us the legal principle that come out from a case. That is ratio decidendi. The decision of the court becomes part of the court. The judges are not there to make laws. The judges are there to interpret the laws. So rule of law can only be possible if the judges interpret the laws according to the wordings of the law. So anything that is their decision is law. But it can only be rule of law when the decision accords to the wordings of the law. When the courts use their own discretion to give judgment not in accordance with the wordings of the law, that is still law, because by our law any decision of the court is law. But that's not rule of law, because it will not be capable of performing the functions of law, which is principally to ensure orderliness in the society. For anything to become rule of law is not a system of government. Rule of law is an effective exercise, or a more effective or more better way to exercise authority. So rule of law is the effective implementation, interpretation of the law to ensure that the law performs the function of the law, which is orderliness of the society. So before the law can perform the functions of the law must accord to the basic principles. Basic principles. There are certain basic principles the law must conform to in order to be possible that that law will perform the function of the law. If the law does not conform to those basic principles, the law will not be effective enough to become rule of law. What are these principles? They are as enunciated by Longfuller. They are the 8 desiderata of the principles of law. These principles of law include 1, the law must be expressed in general terms. In other words, the law must apply to everybody without respect to the person. Everybody must be equal to the law. Everybody must be equal before the law, under the law, without discrimination. 2, the law must be publicly promulgated. There is no in a democracy especially, there's no room for any law to be done secretly. You have heard at times the legislature will do something, you heard that it is smuggled. It is that may be law, but it will not be rule of law, because if the people do not know what the law is, they can't obey it. 3, the law must be prospective. It cannot be retrospective, because you cannot command a man today to do something yesterday. It's impossible. So the law cannot be retroactive. It can only be prospective. 4, the law must be expressed in understandable terms. It must be clear. It must be unambiguous. 5, the law must be consistent with each other. Not coming to section 1 and say something, and coming to section 10 and say a contradictory thing. The Supreme Court must be consistent in their judgments, not giving a judgment in this case and in another case they are contradicting themselves, because one of the principles of law that can make the law to achieve rule of law is that it must be consistent with each other. The next, the law must not require a conduct that is beyond the capacities of the affected parties. When a law gives or requires a conduct that is impossible to achieve, that law can never conduce to rule of law. Because we are human beings, we are limited. Then the law must be administered in accordance with the wordings of the law. I hope I've mentioned about 8 of them. The question now is, in all honesty, would you say that the Supreme Court judgments have been consistent with each other? My respectful answer is I don't think so. The Supreme Court that said that the Plateau State House of Assembly is properly constituted by 6 members because the remaining of the other members have defected. It's still the same Supreme Court I'm hearing saying that it is an absurdity that a governor presented a budget before a 4-man House of Assembly when it was obvious that the other 27 have defected. The law is there by the Supreme Court. And if law are not consistent, they said it will be difficult for that law to perform the functions of law, which is bringing orderliness in the society. The other principle, the last one, which is the 8th one, is that the law should not be changed so regularly to make the subject not to be able to rely on them. You know, you have a law today. Tomorrow you say you have another law. Next tomorrow you say you have another law. That means when I sit down to plan what I will do tomorrow, I won't know what the position of the law is. So one of the 8, which is the final one, is that the law should be constant. The law should be constant, at least over a long time. So they even said that Wike at a certain point had 6 members of the House of Assembly. I'm not aware any court of law said it was an absurdity. You have to apply the law equally to everybody. You don't have to be changing the law every day. The law will not contradict each other. The law must be clear and unambiguous so that rule of law can prevail. So the reason we have too many laws in Nigeria and we are not orderly in Nigeria is because we don't have rule of law. And that confusion permeates all the arms of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. So my reaction to the Supreme Court judgment is, first of all, the position of the law is that the Supreme Court judgment is final and should be obeyed by every person and authority in Nigeria. That is the law. So I am not in anywhere in this interview advocating that the Supreme Court judgment should not be obeyed. No. But we are trained as a lawyer. You can agree or disagree and put your points over respectfully. Now, the summary of the judgment is that the governor ought not to have presented the Appropriation Act to the 4 members, but ought to have presented it to the 27 members. Then that's the election conducted by this River State Independent Electoral Commission. The local government election is invalid. This is the ratio from what I gathered. So what it means is that the River State Independent Electoral Commission should go and organize another election. That's just what it means. So I heard some people throwing the arguments that there was one extension by the legislature extending the tenure of the former local government chairman, extending. What did I say about rule of law? That was a legislative exercise of an executive function, and that is illegal. That's treasonable. What it is, what they're saying is like the National Assembly have the right, when we are not in a state of war, to extend the tenure of Tinubu without election. That's what they're saying. Can you see how absurd that is? The court has even struck down that portion of the sum, if I can remember, as illegal. Because the legislature, you are saying you are for rule of law, and that's why I'm telling you that none of them is for rule of law. And you're saying that the legislature sat down and made law and excluded the River State people from electing their leaders in a democracy, and you say you want to continue. Why didn't you go to court to mandate the governor to organize? And it's not even the governor that organizes election. It's the River State Independent Electoral Commission They are supposed to be independent. So why didn't you go to court to compel them to organize election? But you went to, and you say they have extended your tenure. No. When your tenure finishes, you hand over. If there is no elected person to hand over, then you hand over to the highest civil servant in that office to take charge until an election is done. You cannot replace an illegality with another illegality. I remember saying that I am not in support of Fubara then choosing a caretaker committee because it will be illegal. That the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission must organize an election. So they have organized an election. The Supreme Court said no, they didn't follow certain procedure. So what they should just do is to go and organize another election. And then those things the Supreme Court pointed out, they will now make amends to it. And then the River State will have the people of their choice governing them. So saying that the legislature extended the tenure of the guy is treasonable, because elected people who have tenure, now I'm telling you, another elected people who have tenure, they are extending their tenure. No, if that law is allowed to stand, what it means is that the legislature can sit down and say that they are extending their own tenure, and that they can no longer leave when their own tenure is over. So they will stay put. Because you are setting a precedent. And like I told you about principles of law, when you establish a law, it has to be constant. It has to be consistent with one another. So that, for me, is a legal blasphemy. There is nothing like extension of tenure. The former local government chairman, their tenure ended, expired, and has ended. So what the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission should do is to go back, conduct a fresh election, and have the local government chairman installed by democracy. Now, the other part of it is saying that something should be represented. Well, they will sit down and look at the details of the Supreme Court's judgment and obey it. But the issue of the defection has not been treated by the Supreme Court. You can't infer. Courts and their decisions are done on issue by issue basis. If I recall, when they went to Omotosho, because that was where the case started, the issue was the appropriation bill, the appropriation law, whether it was legal to be presented to 4 members or 27 members. And the court said it shouldn't have been presented to the 4 members. Of course, I disagree with the judgment, citing the earlier Supreme Court judgment of the Plateau State and citing the fact that laws should not contradict each other, should be consistent with one another. That's what you call judicial precedent. And citing the principle of law that will make it to be able to perform the function of law, a law should be constant. I disagree with the judgment. But that does not mean that the 27 members have retained their seat, because the law is very clear. When you defect, you lose your seat. Section 109, 1G. And these lawmakers defected, swore an affidavit that they have defected. Affidavit is one of the greatest instruments of law, because you swore. You can go to jail if you come and admit that you lied, because that's perjury. It's there in the court. The mere idea that they are denying that they did not defect meant an admission that they now realize that defection meant they are losing their seat. Courts check all these things. So the mere idea that they are denying they did not defect is a conclusive evidence that they know that when you defect, you lose your seat. So they have defected and they have lost their seat by law. And the court needed not to give an order before the defection is complete, because the court was not mentioned in that procedure that their seat will be vacant. So in my own opinion, in the eyes of the law, they are not members of the Rivers State House of Assembly. And the Supreme Court has not ruled on that, to my knowledge. And as long as that has not been ruled on, there's still a sword of Damocles hanging over their neck. And if we are a people that respect rule of law, meaning implementing the law, effective exercise of the law, giving life to the law, so that the law will be able to perform its functions of orderliness in the society, maintaining social order, then they are no longer members of the Rivers State House of Assembly. And any court that rules otherwise has destroyed the fabrics of the principles of law, which will not conduce to orderliness in a society. So I plead with my judiciary learned jurists, because I'm a minister in the temple of justice, and I have the duty to uphold the rule of law, that when they are giving judgment, they should please look at these principles and give judgment that are consistent with one another, that is clear, unambiguous, that does not admit a conduct that is impossible. How can you tell, for instance, a governor, for instance, that 2024 budget he has to go and represent it? That's an impossibility, because you are commanding him today to do something yesterday. It's impossible. It's against the principle of law that brings orderliness in society. So I'm appealing to them, whenever they want to make any case law, they should look at the principles of law and make sure that their decision accords with these principles, so that it can engineer orderliness in society. We don't have order in Rivers State because we don't have rule of law. The courts are giving mixed signals and mixed messages, very ambiguous, that is difficult to understand. Why am I saying this? Are you giving an impression that when somebody defects, he still holds his seat? Are you giving a signal that if somebody defects and a governor is now acting with the remainder of the House of Assembly members, are you sending a signal the governor is wrong? These are mixed messages, because the laws are clear. So for now, we don't have rule of law in this country, because our laws are not according to the principles that will make it possible for the principles to achieve the functions of law, which the principle one is to maintain social order. But what's going on in Rivers State is unfortunate. Let me talk about the Wike angle, because when those people were rejoicing, I saw them and I was really very ashamed seeing that people are rejoicing that the statutory allocation meant for their state is being cut off. So their intention is not the welfare of the Rivers people, because they are the ones that will be affected. Their intention is, once it satisfies their quest for power and resources, if the Rivers people want to go and die, they can go and die. I was really ashamed, because this is like the woman who went to King Solomon and told King Solomon to divide the child. Let her take one part, let the other woman take one part, because it's not her child. She knows that the child will die. So if Rivers State dies, provided they get their own part of the cake, they don't mind. That's why they can unashamedly be rejoicing that the court said that statutory allocation will be denied their own people. Now let's talk about the issue of statutory allocation. I will tell you why I disagree with that judgment. First of all, by section 66B of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the power of the courts extends to the determination of civil rights and obligations of persons and of government and persons. Determination of the civil rights. The court cannot go and start punishing a people or even a party in a civil proceeding without first of all determining their civil rights. That is why what the court does is to rule on the legality or otherwise of presenting the appropriation bill and then expect the parties to obey. It is when the parties do not obey that you go further in a procedure which we call the enforcement of judgment. It is in that enforcement of judgment that you can bring penalty against somebody because not obeying court order is contempt of court. You can't go and start punishing reverse people, punishing a governor that has not treated your judgment or order in contempt. What you as a court is supposed to do is to determine the civil rights and obligations of the governor, the legislature, as it regards the issues presented to you, and tell them, governor, this is what you should do, legislature, this is what you should do. It stops there. Then if the governor does not do it, that's when you will say the governor is contemptuous of the courts. And then when the other party now brings a procedure for contempt of court, that's when you can now punish whichever party that did not obey it. That has not been done. And inside your judgment, where you are supposed to determine the civil rights and obligation of the parties, you are including punishment that will even result in punishing the people. For me, the aim of judgment is to give justice. I wonder how that will conduce to justice to reverse people, to a governor that everybody knows is peaceful and obeys the law. The court ought to have just told the governor, no, this is your civil right. No, this is your obligation. No, you exceeded your rights here. This is what you should do. And I know this governor, because when this governor came in first, at the risk of giving up all his rights, he said, for in the interest of peace, he is willing to do anything. The Supreme Court would have just given that judgment and the governor would have obeyed. Why say you are cutting the statutory allocation to the people? You're punishing the people already, punishing the governor, when you have not given the governor the right to voluntarily obey your judgment. Because all through this while, the case has been in court, so you can't say the governor is in contempt. This is the final court of the land. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court acted as if they were in a criminal proceeding, where they started attaching punishment to what ordinarily should be the determination of the civil rights and obligation of the parties. That is what section 6(b) of the Constitution said. If a government is quarreling with a person, or a person is quarreling with the government, they go to court. The court determines their civil rights and obligation, and they are expected to willingly obey the law. You don't attach punishment, because it's not a criminal proceeding. It is when they refuse to obey the law that you now begin to attach punishment, because contempt of the law is now an offense. How do you begin to punish reverse people? Punish the parties before you, withholding these things, without first of all giving them the opportunity to obey. Look, even in political issues, the court has recognized that the politicians have the right to settle their issues politically. And I give you an example. When Obasanjo was in power, there was a judgment the federal government got in favor of the federal government against the littoral states, where the government proved that their sovereignty does not extend beyond their land borders. Obasanjo knew it was going to be a problem, because some of the states, most of their resources come from offshore. Obasanjo opted, despite the decision of the Supreme Court. That's why I said law alone may not give you orderliness in society. So you have to go to the rule of law. Obasanjo went into negotiation, and they agreed on certain percentage that will be paid to those littoral states from the money that they get from offshore, Bayelsa principally. And some people still went to court and said, no, this was not the decision of the Supreme Court. The decision of the Supreme Court is simple. And the Supreme Court said, no, this is a democracy. Politics is allowed. They can settle, politically. That if they settle politically, so be it. It happened in Nigeria. So why would the Supreme Court not give the parties even the option to know whether they can settle politically? You're destroying the fabrics of society, destroying the fabrics of orderliness. That is not the aim of law. The aim of law is for social order. So I expected the Supreme Court to simply sit determine the civil rights and obligation of the parties before them. We've not had any precedent like this before. It's a recondite issue of law. So when they decide it, all the parties are expected to obey. It is when the parties do not obey that you begin to go to the next stage, which is enforcement of the law. That's when the Supreme Court would have now said, okay, you did not obey us, you're contemptuous of the court. We are now saying they will not do this for you, they will not do this for you. Even when the federal government, under this administration, by the Attorney General of the Federation, went to court and they said they will be transmitting the money directly to the local government fund because of certain bureaucratic things that needed to be straightened out. Even if the government is not able to do it, it's going to a year. They got the judgment. And they are trying to sort it out. The federal government has not come out to say the governors are not obeying. The federal government said they are trying to sort it out. Are they in contempt of the court? Strictly, yes. But the court allows them because they know this is politics, this is administration, that they use their own methods to see whether they can sort themselves out. It is when they cannot sort themselves out that the party can go back to court and say, these people do not want to obey your law. Then that's when the court will now enforce the law. Why is the Rivers own case different? No. I disagree with certain things about the judgment. But like I said, they are a final court. They should be obeyed. But the courts will realize that their judgments are not conducing to orderliness in society, to justice, and making the law to perform its functions. And if they continue like this, they may unwittingly bring anarchy to the people.
Your comment to the passing of Pa Adebajo and that of Pa Eden Clark.
It was a sad day for Nigeria. It would have been a beautiful day for Nigeria if these men lived to see what they were fighting for. If they had lived to see the great Nigeria they fought for, the Nigeria of equity, justice and fairness. The truth is that they died complaining that they cannot see it. I heard that when Edwin Clark was dying, that's what I heard. I was not an eyewitness. He was sympathetic to Fubara, still mentioning how they must not allow Fubara to go down in injustice. You can imagine. These are men, 90-something years, nonagenarians, fighting for a society. They could not enter that promised land they were fighting for. That is what made me sad. I remember when we did our campaign in Ibadan, I saw how Adebanjo was climbing the step. You know, when you see them on TV, you still think they have all the energy. I saw the will, the strength, and I knew what kept these people alive. He was climbing the step. It was difficult for him, but he was climbing it until he made it to the top. Looking for justice, looking for a Nigeria of the dream they had when they were youths. Because when they were born, obviously they must have been born into colonialism. They saw it. Nigeria became independent. In their adult age, they saw it. They saw the gradual decay and decline of Nigeria. They saw it. And they continued fighting even in their age. So the only thing that is sad about their passing is that they didn't see that Nigeria that they wished for, prayed for, and worked for, and fought for. But apart from that, they are men well blessed. Blessed in children, blessed in wealth, blessed in riches, blessed in long life. So they were not fighting for themselves. They were fighting for us and for the next generation. My prayer, let that dream they have of a great Nigeria come to fruition in my lifetime. May their souls rest in peace, and may their memory be a blessing. It was a loss for Nigeria, but It was a life well spent. I've told you the only regrets.